brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for joining us for the special COVID edition, the 41st annual Imam Husain Day. As always, we hope that you are safe, happy, and healthy and sound to whoever is watching this and from wherever you are watching this. Before we start the program, as with any program, we start with the tradition of the recitation of the Holy Quran. And for that recitation, I would like to welcome, and please welcome, Brother Zuhair Hussaini.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فاذكروني أذكركم واشكروا لي ولا تكفرون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا استعينوا بالصبر والصلاة إن الله مع الصابرين. فاذكروني أذكركم واشكروا لي ولا تكفرون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا استعينوا بالصبر والصلاة إن الله مع الصابرين. ولا تقولوا لمن يقتل في سبيل الله أموات بل أحياء ولكن لا تشعرون. ولنبلونكم بشيء من الخوف والجوع ونقص من الأموال والأنفس والثمرات وبشر الصابرين. الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. أولئك عليهم صلوات من ربهم ورحمة وأولئك هم المهتدون. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على رسول الله وآله الأطهار على رسول الله وآله الأطهار. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Thank you, Brother Zuhair, for that beautiful recitation. And once again, to all the viewers who have tuned in to join us this afternoon, welcome to the special online edition of the 41st annual Imam Husain Day, sponsored by Qiyam-e-Aman, literally translated as Message for Peace, and also sponsored by standwithdignity.org. Now, for those who have tuned in this afternoon, just a few words to explain the history of this program of Imam Husain Day. And as with any great needed idea, movement, or organization that starts off in a private basement, Imam Husain Day was no different. And in 1979, the Imam Husain Day Committee was founded. Now, the idea and purpose of this committee was to take the memory and history of Imam Husain and his universal message and his everlasting revolution, along with the concept behind Karbala, to an academic level. Now, this group of concerned individuals got together, and being almost nearly established immigrants in the United States for just about a decade or so, felt that there was a need to open the doors of Imam Husain to the general public. And with that, its first acting president, Dr. Sayyid Rizvi, who is a prominent cardiologist and member of the community, along with his close friends, established and began the Imam Husain Day program. And with that, as a result, the Islamic Day Celebrating Council was formed in New York and New Jersey. Now, since then, renowned and reputable academia scholars from popular universities, from different backgrounds, religious leaders of all faiths, including Jews, Christians, Hindus, politicians, have all taken part in this program to share their knowledge, insight, and personal experiences to not only bridge the gap between communities, but to also exchange interfaith dialogue. Now, with that, to further elaborate on the history of this program, I would like to invite the secretary of Imam Husain Day. Please give a warm welcome to Brother Zain Naqvi.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Dear respected scholars, brothers and sisters, guests from around the world, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Zain Naqvi, and welcome to Imam Husain Day 2020, a beacon of divine worldly justice. It is my honor and my privilege to welcome you to this very special event, organized by Qiyam-e-Aman and Stand with Dignity. While Imam Husain Day has never been held in an online-only virtual format like we are doing this year, we felt it was important that even during this global pandemic, we continue to push forward with this event, especially in light of today's topic, which we believe has particular importance to today's times. By way of background, Imam Husain Day was inaugurated in the year 1979 when a group of community members, a handful of them, got together at Mehfil Shah Khurasan, a local Islamic center, with what was an idea. And that idea, 45 years later, according to the Islamic calendar, and 42 years later, according to the Gregorian calendar, has now cultivated and flourished into the event that we are so pleased to bring you this afternoon. In today's society, where we find ourselves, like I mentioned, in the midst of a global pandemic, millions have been infected, hundreds of thousands have died, many of them alone, without family and friends to console them, to be with them in their last moments, where we feel like the world is crumbling around us as injustice and oppression spreads to every corner of the world. And as we now approach what is likely to be the most important presidential election of modern times, it becomes clear that there is no better example for hope, for justice, for righteousness, for guidance than Imam Husain alayhi salam. Because indeed, in the history of humanity, there is no one like him. There is no one who faced the trials, the difficulties, the hardships that Imam Husain faced, for in one day, in one afternoon, he watched the brutal death of his 6-month-old son, his 18-year-old son, his 13-year-old nephew, his brother, and countless other of his family members and his companions, and even himself as he died on that day. But during, before, and after those difficulties, and even while he took his last breath, Imam Husain only looked at the good, only continued to remember God and thank God for everything that he had been given in order to fight against this injustice. And it is this example of fighting against injustice at all costs that has inspired so many activists and people from around the world to fight for what they believe in, no matter what it costs, to fight for goodness, to fight for righteousness, to fight for the oppressed people around the world. And indeed, Imam Husain has become a beacon of hope and justice for millions around the world. We are very honored to have with us this afternoon a very distinguished and esteemed panel of speakers. We are honored to have with us Mawlana Assad Jafari, an Islamic scholar from Canada, Dr. Craig Considine, a professor, Father Christopher Clohessy, a religious scholar, Sheikh Nuru Muhammad, a religious scholar from Canada, and finally Mawlana Rizvi, a religious scholar from New Jersey. And we look forward to hearing from our esteemed panel, as we believe their varying backgrounds will make for a very fruitful and productive discussion on today's topic. On behalf of Bayam Aman and Stand With Dignity, today's sponsors, I warmly welcome all of you to today's event, Imam Husain Day 2020, and we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that this event will be beneficial for all of you. And we hope and we pray that next year we have the opportunity to host this event in person. And finally, for all those that are watching and those that may not be watching, we continue to pray for everyone's good health and safety during this time. Once again, thank you for joining us and welcome to Imam Husain Day 2020.
Thank you very much for those beautiful words. And we're going to move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Mawlana Sayyid Rizwan Rizvi. Mawlana Sayyid Rizwan Rizvi was born in a family of ulama in Hyderabad, Pakistan. His father, Sayyid Talmiz Hussain Rizvi, migrated from India with his grandfather, Hujjatul Islam, Mawlana Sayyid Izharul Hussain Rizvi. He started his religious studies in Chicago, Illinois, under the tutelage of Hujjatul Islam, Mawlana Amir Mukhtar Faizi, at the Imam Ali Seminary, where he studied for 1 year. Thereafter, he attended the Islamic Seminary of Qum in 2000. And after completing his general coursework in Arabic literature, jurisprudence, Quran, Mawlana Rizvi focused his attention towards Islamic philosophy, and during the latter part of his studies on Irfan Islamiyya. He has published various articles on Taqleed, marriage, and Ibadah. Mawlana Rizvi is known as a dynamic speaker in the community, and he has delivered sermons and lectures throughout the United States, and is also the resident alim at Masjid Ali in Somerset, New Jersey. And we are pleased to have him here for the 41st annual Imam Husain Day. So please give a very warm welcome to Mawlana Sayyid Rizwan Rizvi.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين أبي القاسم محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا أما بعد فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى وقوله الحق وهو أصدق القائلين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين لله شهداء بالقسط ولا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على ألا تعدلوا اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى صدق الله العلي العظيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to the annual Imam Husain Day program. This year's program, as you can see, is under the title of Imam Husain, a beacon of divine and worldly justice. It is an honor for me to be regular in this program every year and take part in whatever capacity I can. And while we are going through these Ayyam-e-Azha, this event stands out primarily because of the longevity of this program. As you can see that it was established back in 1979, and this program is as old as I am. I've been given about 20 minutes to speak on this topic of Imam Husain, a beacon of religious and worldly justice. I chose this ayat from Surah Ma'idah, ayat number 8, very commonly recited and a famous ayat in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses by saying, O you who have faith, be maintainers as witnesses for the sake of Allah, of justice. And ill feeling of a people should never lead you to be unfair. Be fair, that is nearer to taqwa. Just to speak about this ayat tells you how important it is, that how Islam is touching on those very sensitive areas where sometimes we lose our sense of fairness and we end up committing injustice. That people who are close to us, people who are maybe our family or friends, our loved ones, it is possible that we sometime, for the sake of our friendship, for the sake of our love for them, overlook justice. But Islam is telling us that should not be the case. One of the most important lessons from Ashura is the recognition of our duty to defend the truth, which is haqq, and to stand up against oppression, which is batil, in every age. Qiyam of Imam Husain was not specific for himself and his companions to that period only. In fact, it was a religious obligation emerging from those conditions that can happen anytime, anywhere. Imam Husain is actually an inspiration against social, racial, and economic injustices. Social injustice can be described as a situation in which dominant people or dominant population is made known of the inequity that leads for the others due to their relative position in the structure of power. Social injustice occurs in a situation where the equals are treated unequally. and the unequal is treated equally. Three common examples of social injustice include discrimination, ageism, and homophobia. Of course, in today's discussion, primarily discussion will be in reference to social injustice or justice in general. But we find that discrimination has a great deal of role when it comes to injustice in our societies. As you see in the banner behind me also, the present conditions that we are facing in this country, how some people of color are treated unfairly, how there's white privilege that prevails. So discrimination is found in every facet of our life, whether it's education, employment, voting, healthcare services, transportation, public accommodations, and even government benefits and services. Discrimination is described as unequal treatment of persons for a reason which has nothing to do with the legal rights or ability. It is considered illegal by the federal and state laws of the United States of America. These laws prohibit discrimination in employment, availability of housing, rates of pay, right of promotion, educational opportunities, civil rights, and the use of facilities based on one's race, nationality, creed, color, age, and you name it. But we see in the society that we live in, Black lives or the lives of minorities are marginalized. Imam Husain considered his movement against those who became rulers, so you can relate to those who are power-hungry rulers of the day, to those power-hungry rulers of that time. That those who became rulers by force and injustice, those who changed the haram into halal and vice versa, broke away from the covenant of Allah, crossed the boundaries set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, went against the sunnah of the Holy Prophet. Imam reminded people in his sermon that he is the role model for all of them to follow. وَلَكُمْ فِيَّ أُسْوَةٌ, that in me, for you is, a role model for you to follow. Hence, the essence of the Qiyam of Karbala is widespread in the land and in time. Taking inspiration from this maktab, one should stand against tyranny and sacrifice for honor and freedom. We find that justice is one of the original messages of all the messengers of Allah. And since Imam Husain is the waris of all of the Anbiyas, we recite in Ziyarat Waritha, Assalamu alayka ya Adam Safatillah, and eventually we link it to Imam Husain, that the original message of all the messengers was justice. And one of the qualities of justice is that it can easily be recognized with your mere aql. And implementing it doesn't require any particular reason. Rather, it is the biggest reason in itself. This is why justice doesn't recognize friends or enemies, as the ayat that I recited indicated. It does not recognize believers or disbelievers. In fact, it sees them all from one eye. Allah says in this ayat of Surah Ma'idah, number 8, وَلَا يَجْرِمَنَّكُمْ شَنَعَانُ قَوْمٍ عَلَىٰ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا اعْدِلُوا أَقْرَبُ لِلتَّقْوَى, and let not hatred of a people incite you not to act equitably. Rather, act equitably. That is nearer to taqwa and piety. A society which lacks social justice, or justice in general, indeed lacks humanity and purpose of life. Amir al-Mu'mineen has also stated a place where a person, an oppressed or the poor, does not have the ability to stand up for his rights. That society is lacking justice. Everyone in a society has honor and rights. If one trespasses this honor and these rights, it is considered zulm, which is injustice. This is why God has promised punishment to a zalim, which is compensation for the suffering of an oppressed. Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib ﷺ said, يوم المظلوم على الظالم أشد من يوم الظالم على المظلوم. Today, while the Muslim may be suffering in the hands of the zalim, but the suffering of the zalim from the hands of Mazlum will be severe. The day of revenge by an oppressed over an unjust is more severe than what oppressor did in his days while he was practicing injustice. One of the objectives of Imam Husain's revolution was implementation of social justice in the society. Reason of injustice doesn't start from Yazid's policies. Only it goes back to the time of his father. In fact, ever since the Umayyad came into power. As a look into history today, when you see, unfortunately, so many people defending a person like Yazid, that's injustice in itself. There's someone who's a beacon of justice, Imam Husain. Today, people are doubting what he stood for. While so many of non-Muslims and Muslims alike have taken inspiration from Imam Husain and his movement. This is why we read in one of the letters of Imam Husain to the people of Kufa when he said, "Amma ba'd faqad alimtum anna Rasulullah qad qala fi hayatihi." You know that the Holy Prophet has said in his lifetime, "Man ra'a sultanan ja'iran mustahillan li hurumillah nakithan li ahdillah mukhalifan li sunnati Rasulillah ya'malu fi ibadillah bil ithmi wal udwan thumma lam yughayyir biqawlin wala bifi'lin kana haqiqan ala Allah an yudkhilahu madkhalah." He said, you know very well, the Prophet said in his life, that whoever sees a tyrant sultan, one who considers haram to be halal, breaks the covenant of Allah, goes against the sunnah of the Holy Prophet, acts with sins and aggression, and if one doesn't try to change this rhetoric with their speech or with their action, then it is appropriate for Allah to enter this person in the same place as that oppressor, because you are siding with injustice. Even though Imam is addressing the people of Kufa, but he's speaking to every freedom-loving person today. Don't think today, when we see white supremacy, see discrimination in this part of the world, or some people taking streets because certain individuals in the history were condemned, it is because we are so far away from the time of Rasulullah? No. Not too long after the wafat of the Holy Prophet, there was mass injustice and discrimination into practice. Even by those who heard Prophet say this, "La fadla li arabiyyin ala ajami, wala li ajami ala arabi, wala li aswad ala ahmar, wala li ahmar ala aswad, illa bit taqwa." There's no virtue of an Arab over non-Arab, vice versa. Black over white, as red is mentioned over here, but vice versa, except due to taqwa. Why? Because inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. That's the only criteria that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala recognizes. The criteria for superiority is not your ethnicity, your color of skin, your background. No, it's taqwa that you have in it. Some people today justify the acts of Yazid, unfortunately, acts of his father, and the other oppressors of Banu Umayyah. Today, for the first time, we are actually seeing this. There were always people who would justify the acts of Yazid and his father. But we rarely heard anyone stand up for justification of his grandfather, Abu Sufyan. But we see that today all three are put in the category where people are chanting and they are standing up, considering this to be the muqaddasat of the religion, that these are holy men for them, pious men for them, and that they should not be condemned. We should not send what we call that may Allah take his mercy away from these people. So you see some people today are justifying the acts of Yazid. That is the biggest oppression, acts of his father and his grandfather, and all of Umayyah for that matter. What do they say? They say, well, they were mujtahid, and they acted according to their religious edicts, Or even if they made mistakes, they repented. So we don't have any right to go ahead and curse or to send la'an on those who have repented. They have to be reminded that if you deny the injustice of the past, you won't recognize the injustice of today. These people are denying the injustice of the past. They're denying the actions of Yazid and his party. And therefore they won't be able to recognize the injustice today. It was said, Ayyuhuma afdal, al-adlu aw al-jud. Which one is superior? Justice or generosity? Sometimes people will say, well, you know, be generous, give something to us, forget about being just. So al-adlu sa'isun am wal-judu aradun khas. Fal-adlu ashrafuhuma wa afdaluhuma. Justice is a general law for everyone. Everyone benefits from this justice. Generosity is a temporary condition for a few. That's why when Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib was martyred, it was said, قُتِلَ عَلِيٌّ فِي الْمِحْرَابِ لِشِدَّةِ عَدْلِهِ. That Ali is killed in the mihrab of masjid. Not because he's the fourth caliph for them, or he's relative of the Holy Prophet. No, rather because of his shiddati adl. That's why if you look into history, all these people, you find these surprising characters in history. Those people who stood by Ali ibn Abi Talib after the wafat of the Holy Prophet, when the door of Fatima was struck, there were individuals in the form of Talha who were accompanying Amir al-Mu'mineen, showing loyalty to him, speaking up in support of and defense of Amir al-Mu'mineen, is standing up against the first caliph. These are the same people whom you find when Imam Ali comes into, you know, the Khilafat al-Zahiri, and he has the power. They think that, well, we've done enough for Ali, now he will take care of us. Imam Ali dealt with everyone based on adalat. And that's why this maqula is there, that قُتِلَ عَلِيٌّ فِي الْمِحْرَابِ لِشِدَّةِ عَدْلِهِ, that he was killed due to his excessive adl. I'll conclude by this sentence. The sentence is not a hadith, but you've heard it a great deal. Everyone probably knows it. كُلُّ يَوْمٍ عَاشُورَا وَكُلُّ أَرْضٍ كَرْبَلَا. It's not a hadith, but it is a reality which doesn't undermine the land of Karbala. When we say Kullu Ardin Karbala, no, Karbala has its own place, which is absolutely a piece of heaven on earth, and no other land could be compared with it. And similarly, no other day could be compared with the day of Ashura. The actual day of Ashura, which is the darkest and the most devastating day ever. But this Kullu Yawmin Ashura wa Kullu Ardin Karbala, instead it speaks about the constant struggle between Haqq and Batil, even in the present day and age. That's what Kullu Yawmin Ashura wa Kullu Ardin Karbala is mentioning. So Imam alayhi salatu wasalam stood for justice. He stood up so that we can breathe today. His example is there, his sacrifice is there, so that we know and we recognize what is justice. And we have the courage and the strength to say no to every type of injustice. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Father Christopher Clohessy, who is joining us all the way live from Rome, Italy. Father Christopher Clohessy is a South African-born Catholic priest who holds a Bachelor's of Sacred Theology from the Pontifical Urbanianum University in Rome and a PhD from the Pontifical Institute for Arabic and Islamic Studies, which is also in Rome. Presently, he's a resident faculty member of the Pontifical Institute for Arabic and Islamic Studies, lecturing there in Shia Islamic Studies, Quranic Studies, Islamic ethics, and also Christian and Muslim dialogue as well, and is a visiting lecturer at the Pontifical Beta College in Rome. He's the author of such books such as Fatima, Daughter of Muhammad, and Half My Heart, the narrative of Zainab, daughter of Ali, and is about to publish a third work concerning the predictions by angels and in dreams of the martyrdom of Imam Husain in Karbala. With that, please give a very warm welcome all the way from Rome, Italy, to Father Christopher Clohessy.
It's a great joy for me, a great happiness to join you from the city of Rome for this occasion, when you are celebrating once again the life of Al-Hussain. And in particular, I am delighted to be able to talk to you a little today and say a few words about the lady Zainab, whose life I have researched and about whom I have written. And I wrote about Lady Zainab for a particular purpose, and that is because the truth is that while there is untold devotion to her in the Islamic world, and I mean specifically the Shi'i Islamic world, untold piety surrounding her life and her virtues, there's very little academic information. There are substantial gaps in the biography, the academic biography of Lady Zainab, and this leads to myth quite often. The academic gaps in people's biography are the places where myth begins to happen. Now, myth in itself is never a bad thing because stories are told because they have a particular regenerative power. The reason why we tell the story of Karbala over and over again is not just so that people know the details, but because it regenerates the community in its thirst for justice. But myths are also the places where we quite often create personalities, theologies, spiritualities around people like Zainab that make them untouchable, unreachable for ordinary men and women. But the point about Lady Zainab is that she is not unreachable and she is not untouchable. She is one of those extraordinarily rare people for whom the world looks up from all its fighting, all its squabbling, to see who this is, who so blesses us with her talent and her ability, so blesses us with her life that is so full of imagination. She's one of those startling personalities who so blesses our lives, my life, with her talent and her imagination, that she causes me to stop and to ask how it is that I myself am attempting, with whatever imagination or talent I have, to bless the lives of those around me. Zainab is one of those personalities who is one of the very, very best people around us. And the very best people around us, the best of the best, people who have experienced what it means to be defeated, people who have been through the most dreadful suffering, who have endured struggle heroically, people who understand what it means to lose, but have found their way out of those situations. People like that, people like Zainab, they don't just happen. They are forged by a divine power. They have an appreciation of life, appreciation that fills them with a compassion and a wisdom and a thirst for what they know to be just. So when I speak, as I often do, about a Zainabian praxis, all I really mean is how we can find ways of making Lady Zainab's life accessible again, of representing her life in a manner that makes it possible for ordinary people like myself to emulate her, to find her, that she is back within my reach, within the reach of countless ordinary men and women who aren't necessarily like her, engaged in great battles and struggles for justice, but whose everyday engagement with life is quite often given over to very ordinary things, but who are still confronted every day with choices, moral choices, personal stands for justice. After all, we each of us have our own Karbala. We each of us have to take our own moral stand, and that might be a stand that is taken on the world stage, or it might be a stand that is taken in the household, in the private sphere of the family, nonetheless, each of us has to fight our fight for justice. Now, we know a certain number of elements of the life of Lady Zainab, and most particularly, I think, the element that dominates her life is trauma. She is a young child at the death of her grandfather, the Prophet of Islam, in whose household, in whose shadow of sanctity she has grown up. Soon after that, she is traumatized by the death of her mother, the Lady Fatima. And not only the death of Lady Fatima, but all of the dreadful injustice inflicted upon her by the leadership of the day, the suffering inflicted on her. Soon after that, she is witness to the assassination of her father Ali, then the assassination of her brother Al-Hassan, and finally the assassination of her brother Al-Hussain, so that we have to acknowledge that from the beginning, the life of this woman is filled with traumatic events. And I would say that probably when we talk about the journey of Lady Zainab, the famous journey that she makes from Medina to Mecca, from Mecca to Karbala, there's in fact a twofold journey that she makes. She makes this historical, physical journey, arriving finally with her brother and his small group of supporters in Karbala. But she also has a second journey, and it's a journey that you and I also have to undertake, and this is the existential journey. We have to become who we were created to be. This is the famous phrase used by Shariati of Lady Fatima. Fatima becoming Fatima, or Fatima is Fatima. He's describing the journey in which the Lady Fatima becomes the woman who God made her to be. And Zainab goes through exactly the same experience. She ends up at Karbala becoming, in that moment and in that role, who she was made to be. And each of us has to go through that same journey, even if it isn't on the same physical level. For each of us, there is a journey, and I propose Zainab as a universal archetype, a universal model, like her brother Al-Hussein, of course, because like him, she transcends the boundaries of religion and of language and of culture. She becomes a model, a paradigm for all those people, ordinary men and women, who not only have to take daily stands for morality and for justice, but also who have to become who it is that God created them to be, to take up, if you like, the role that God created for them. So we have enough biography now of the Lady Fatima, her early childhood in the household of the Prophet, those traumatic events of a series of deaths, Muhammad followed by Ali, Fatima followed by Ali, followed by Hassan, and finally Hussain. Enough biography for a fairly authentic voice of Zainab to reach down to us in 1300 years. As we've noticed, and that we have to keep reminding ourselves, it's a life that begins with trauma, and therefore I would say that the voice of Lady Zainab is directed first of all to those who are traumatized, people in our society who are simply traumatized. She speaks to the wounded. After all, why wouldn't you speak to the wounded of our society? If you had the capacity to give life to someone, a more intense life, a more vibrant life, surely you would do it. Why wouldn't she? I think that part of the Karbala of modern society, part of the struggle, is that we find ourselves surrounded at every moment by people who live with a sadness that runs down to their bones, people who are so fragile and have been broken by life. Their dreams have been shattered, or their plans have all gone wrong, or their wounds are just too deep now to be healed on this side of the day of resurrection. It's easy for us to tell people to pull yourself together, but until we've been through the trauma that some people have been through, we don't have the right to use such platitudes to describe their need. We have to find a way of shepherding people in the same way that the Lady Zainab shepherded that group of survivors after the Battle of Karbala, the other women of the Ahl Bayt, and also the young children who survived. We have to shepherd wounded people into a life that is more abundant, a life that offers them a better chance at justice and at truth. And this is not about self-improvement. This is not about a good feeling that tomorrow will be better, that next time it won't be so bad. No, this is a divine hope that we need to be able to offer people. So I would say that in the first place, the voice of Lady Zainab is directed at those whose lives have been traumatized by the world in which we find ourselves now. But there's a second group to whom the Lady Zainab speaks. She speaks to people who are wavering, people who are faced with decisions they have to make every day that are ethical, decisions that are moral, stands for justice, but decisions that paralyze them with fear because they don't want to be unpopular. They don't want to make enemies. They don't want to lose friends. And so they are paralyzed and unable to make these crucial daily decisions for ethical behavior, for moral behavior, no matter how big or small that decision may be. The very fact that Zainab went to Karbala, the very fact that on at least 3 occasions she intervened on the battlefield itself in what was happening around her, the very fact that she took this astonishing stand before the 2 great tyrants of her day, Ziyad and Yazid, the very fact that she preached these 2 great protests, one to the people of Kufa, indicting them for their failure to act, and then one also that indicted the whole leadership of Yazid. The fact of all that means that Zainab is not just a person who speaks truth to power. This is an old platitude we hear often. No. Zainab is a person who speaks the truth. Not just an individual truth, not just a particular truth, a religious truth or a political truth. We have no shortage of such truths. No, Zainab speaks the truth before the people of Kufa and before the throne of Yazid. Radical truthfulness in every single word we speak, in the way we think about people, the way we think about situations. People and communities need the truth if they're going to have any chance at a life that is just and at a life in which real holiness of life, real goodness of life can be built. But telling the truth, always telling the truth, that's a very difficult thing for people. It takes a lifetime of practice and discipline, because sometimes telling the truth is going to lead to conflict. Hussain knew this. So did the Lady Zainab when she set out for Karbala with him. But unless we have the truth, people and communities can never ever live a life of peace and justice. You will never have peace unless you have justice. And you will never have justice unless you have truth. I'm quite insistent that Lady Zainab was not a woman who had male virtues. Courage is not a male virtue, it's a human virtue. Men and women are both called to be courageous. A certain eloquence in telling the truth, a dauntlessness in the face of a tyrant. These are not male virtues, these are human virtues to which all men and women are called. And again, the Lady Zainab becomes, for me, a universal model of what it means to live the virtues that add quality to the lives of people around us. In the end, it's not about our quality of life. It's about the quality that we are adding to people around us. Saying what needs to be said, even at a great cost. You will have heard and you will continue to hear commentators talking about the voice of Lady Zainab as it speaks to the traumatized and as it speaks to those who are wavering. But there's the third group that interests me, and I spoke about this some months ago in England, and I repeat it here because I think it's important. There is another group to whom the voice of Lady Zainab could be of great importance, and that is that group of people who now live on the fringes of society, or at least who live on the fringes of what society regards as significant, as possessing value. I'm speaking about the elderly. I'm speaking about the widows and widowers who live among us and who have grown frail under the burden of their years, but who still, if we allow them to, bless our lives with such wisdom, with such lived experience, with such faith, with the grace of the countless sacrifices that they have made over so many years. Men and women who have learned to live patiently with themselves, patiently with their own frailty. They always challenge us. I know that the society in which we live thinks that it is the youth who are the models, the youth who are the models of vision, the youth who are the models of vigor and imagination, but sacred history, the history of a God who intervenes in our world through revelation. Sacred history tells a different story, because as you read the texts, you discover that over and over again, God chooses elderly people, people advanced in years, to advance his own intervention in our world. Senior citizens from whom, if we would let them, we could gain such insight, such wisdom, experience that has been matured by years of patience and optimism. The very fact that Zainab, one of the central figures on the field of Karbala, was a woman who was no longer young, that very fact consistently challenges all those places and all those situations where elderly people, especially elderly women, are simply disregarded or downgraded or sidelined and no longer valued by the society in which we live as having anything to offer. Zainab is incarnate in every grandmother you know, in every mother you know, all of those grandmothers and mothers of our communities whose stories we often don't know, but who, like Zainab, have had their Karbala moments, like Zainab, have had to make stands that has cost them so much energy and so much courage, stands for truth, stands for justice, stands for morality, stands for what is right. Their battles may not have been as public as the battle of the Lady Zainab, but they were battles nonetheless, fighting the same tyranny that she fought, the tyranny of a society that repeatedly marginalizes others, the elderly, freezing them out, ignoring their hard-won dignity. Look around you and you will see that our communities are not short of elderly men and women, widows and widowers, who use up a great deal of energy trying not to let people know how reduced their lives have become, how reduced their income is, how tiny their pensions have grown, how the inheritance they may have received has dwindled away to nothing because of the cost of living, how they are reduced to scarcity, how things wear out and can't be replaced, so that they begin to look a little raggedy, a little withered. Their social life that was once quite strong has faded to almost nothing. They lose all the signs that they once had a good life. They have children now grown up who may not be as happy as their parents wanted them to be, may not be as close or as attentive as their parents would want them to be. To be elderly and to be poor, to be alone, is to live on the edges of society. It is to be invisible. In fact, in the Hebrew language, the word that is used for widow means the silent one. So I hold before you all the grandmothers and mothers whom you have ever known and loved, women of such fierce faith and belief, who just held on, unfazed by everything that worked against them, to make sure that their families would be brought up in faith, would be brought up in morality and in justice and in goodness. Lady Zainab, for me, represents them all. And through every grandmother, through every mother, she challenges us and maybe even indicts us with a voice that is as fresh as the voice that rang out in the courtyard of Kufa and in the palace of Yazid. The voice of Zainab challenges us to radical truthfulness, to live truthfully in the present moment, telling the truth about the present moment. And really, going back to history for a moment, if Zainab is, in fact, as we claim she is, an archetype of defiant resistance in the face of injustice, then she is in the courtyard and the court of the palace of Yazid at her very best. Because there, as she challenges him, she is reminding us never to forget Karbala. You know better than I do that Karbala has never been, in at least the Shi'i Islamic community, Karbala has never been understood as a once-for-all historical event. It's not that. No, Karbala is an occurrence that people inhabit and constantly renew by its retelling. The Karbala event, I've said so often, sketches out for us a space in which we can live lives that are better, lives that are more constructive, lives that are more meaningful. God, if you like, has written the word Karbala into human history and onto the human heart, written it into the lives of the faithful, into their consciousness. He's used Karbala as the pen or the pencil by which he sketches into humanity, inscribes into humanity the capacity for courage and for justice. So that when we look through Karbala, when we look through the prism, if you like, of Karbala, it becomes possible for people to step back and to reassess their lives and to see that even in the worst moments, even in the moments of great struggle and even seeming defeat, our lives are not futile, our lives are not aimless, they are fruitful and decisive. So that what looks like a defeat at the death of Hussain and his small band of followers is not a defeat, but contains numerous glimpses of a final victory. See, that's why we can't treat Karbala the way we treat other historical battles. The battles we learn about in school, the Battle of Waterloo or the Battle of Britain or any other battle you can think of. Because if we begin to treat Karbala like that, then we are beginning to discount the quality of life that Karbala has given birth to in every generation, in every community over all these 13 or 1400 years. Karbala is the place where injustice and inequality come undone because it beckons human beings in every generation to live life more intensely, more deeply engaged with justice, to stand before any example of inequality or with iniquity, with a sadness that goads you into an action. Karbala is an orientation. It's not an event. It's a way of walking through life. Not just an historical affair, but a constant bending or a constant curving towards what is right, what is just, towards integrity. And its remembrance, the remembrance that Zainab began in the court of Yazid and in the retelling of the event, its remembrance is an ongoing reproach in every generation to the tyrants of our day. Those tyrants who live among us and who have attempted to convince us that without military force or coercion, without wealth and weapons, you can't shape a better world. Well, Zainab tells a different story. As in the shadow of her martyred brother, she retells the account of Karbala. So I place these thoughts before you with great serenity and joy that you've allowed me to be part of this occasion. The voice of the Lady Zainab who speaks to those who are wavering, who must make choices every day that are moral and ethical but difficult to make. The voice of the Lady Zainab who speaks to those who are traumatized, people in our own families perhaps, people we meet every day, whose lives have been destroyed by modern society. And the voice of the Lady Zainab who speaks to the elderly among us, reminding them that they have an untold value still the ability to be fruitful in society and to add dignity and wisdom because of their experience. And finally, the voice of Lady Zainab, which forbids us to forget Karbala or to treat it as some historical event, which invites us rather to keep retelling the story, not only as a way of goading ourselves into a more just way of life, but also as a reproach against those who still fulfill the role of the Yazids and the Ziyads of our own present day. From Rome, I wish you every good thing, every blessing for this celebration.
Thank you very much for those words, and we're going to move this program right along. Our next speaker is joining us all the way from the UK, from the United Kingdom, and that is Sheikh Nuru Muhammad. Sheikh Nuru is a former ordained spiritual caregiver at Johannesburg Correctional Center in South Africa, and he co-founded the Imamia Islamic Research Center in Johannesburg, South Africa as well. He founded the Ummu Abiha Empowerment Center in Kumasi, Ghana also. After taking a BA in Islamic philosophy and mysticism at Al-Mustafa International University in Iran, he completed an MA in Islamic Studies at Middlesex University. He is also a former visiting lecturer at the Tangaza University in Nairobi, Kenya. He's also a member of the Citizens UK Birmingham Leadership Group and the Birmingham Muslim Liaison Committee, and has served as Minister of Religion at centers in South Africa, Kenya, and also the UK. And we are honored that he has joined us today for the 41st annual Imam Husain Day, all the way from the United Kingdom. Please give a very warm welcome to Sheikh Nuru Muhammad.
In the name of Almighty Allah, most gracious, ever merciful, my dear brothers and sisters, I greet you with the greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuhu. It is indeed a great pleasure and honor to be given the opportunity to share a word or two from the inspirations we learn from Imam Husain. May the blessings of Almighty God be on him and his purified family. Thanks to the Stand with Dignity for organizing this very important program called Hussain Day. No doubt, there are so many lessons and inspirations that I and you can learn from this great personality called Hussain to perfect and to reform ourselves. I would like to begin my humble presentation by asking a very important fundamental question as to what is the main aim of a religion and our democratic institutions. When I talk of religion, I'm talking of all kinds or types of religion, be it Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism. What is the main aim of all these religions? And what is the main aim of democratic institutions of whatever form? In my humble and candid opinion, religion and democratic institutions share aim in common. And the main aim is to establish social justice, is to bring about harmony, is to ensure that people from whatever background are able to live side by side or peacefully coexist. The aim of a religion and democratic institution is to ensure that each and everyone receives his or her equal share. Now the question I have for myself and all brothers and sisters, irrespective of our backgrounds and religion, is that if the major aim of our religions and the major aim of democratic institutions is to ensure absolute social justice, peaceful coexistence, then what do we see around? Do we see social justice? Do we see peaceful coexistence? Or we see something else? When I look around as a person, I do not see social justice. I do not see peaceful coexistence. I do not see harmony the way it's supposed to be. When I look around, I do not see the world the way it's supposed to be. But what I see, number one, is corruption manifesting in different forms. I see tyranny manifesting in different forms. Women are becoming widows. Children are becoming orphans, fatherless, motherless. When I look around, I see hunger. I see poverty. When I look around, I see antagonism. I see discrimination. I see racism reaching its peak. I see people losing their lives out of racism, out of discrimination, out of antagonism, out of corruption, out of tyranny. The question still remains: what is the main aim of our religion and democratic institutions? Isn't it social justice? But why don't we see social justice manifesting everywhere in the world, but we see little of it? My dear brothers and sisters, what is missing, or what is the missing link? In my humble opinion, the missing link, or what is missing, is leadership like that of Hussain, the son of Ali, the son of Fatima. What is missing are leaders who are inspired by the values taught and established by Hussain on the 10th day of Muharram in the holy city of Karbala in the Republic of Iraq. The missing link is true active leadership. Why Hussain? And why are we commemorating today as Hussain Day? It's simply because Hussain taught us one thing. Do you know why is that? Selflessness. That's why we are of the view that Hussain is epitome of social justice. He is epitome of love. Imam Husain, as we say the Muslims, showed us the way through his selflessness. And through this selflessness, Hussain taught us two things: how to die and how to live. How did he teach us how to die? Hussain never showed fear in the face of absolute tyranny and corruption and racism and antagonism and discrimination. He was willing to sacrifice himself for the sake of nothing but social justice. He was willing to sacrifice himself for human dignity. He was willing to sacrifice himself for morality. He was willing to sacrifice himself for peaceful coexistence. That is why there is no better leader to learn from and to be inspired by his movement than Hussain, the son of Ali. No wonder great leaders of this world were inspired by Hussain. Have you forgotten Mahatma Gandhi, who is highly celebrated? He was inspired by Hussain. Have you forgotten Charles Dickens, a great leader? He was inspired by Hussain. Have you forgotten Edward Gibbon, great leader, inspired by Hussain? And there are so many leaders across the globe who were inspired by Hussain. And those leaders who were inspired by Hussain did not only change themselves, but they impacted positively in their communities. You know what Hussein said? He said, I will sacrifice myself to ensure the survival of the religion of my grandfather. Who was his grandfather? The Holy Prophet Muhammad. Why Hussein saying, I will sacrifice for the survival of the religion of his grandfather? Because the grandfather stood for nothing but absolute social justice. And that is what exactly the Holy Quran invites us all to establish and to achieve within our communities and within our countries. You know what the Holy Prophet Muhammad mentioned? He said, for you and I, and for any leader to be able to bring about change in his or her community, two factors are needed. The first factor is sacrifice. And the second one is selflessness. Hence, if you examine the movement and the mission of Imam Husain, you will no doubt come across so many traces of sacrifice and so many traces of selflessness. Hussein learned from his grandfather, and he also learned from his beloved mother by the name Fatima. Fatima, instead of looking after herself and her children, should first reach out to the neighbors before herself and her children. That's selflessness. That's social justice. Hussein learned again from his beloved father, Imam Ali alayhi salam, who established nothing but absolute social justice, where he said, people are of two kinds. It's either your brother in faith or your equals in humanity. The second thing we learn from the selflessness of Hussein is what? He taught us how to live. How do you live in this world? By ensuring that you reach out to those who are in need. By playing your part to ensure that no one is undermined, no one is marginalized, no one suffers, irrespective of their color, irrespective of their status. Hussein taught us, when we live in this world, we should try as much as we can not to have this superiority complex over others. Therefore, I take this opportunity, my beloved brothers and sisters in faith, and my beloved brothers and sisters in humanity, to invite myself humbly and to invite each and every one of you, irrespective of your geographical background, irrespective of your financial status or your social status or intellectual status, to take inspirations from Imam Husain. Our world is bleeding. We need absolute social justice. Let us be inspired by the true mission of Hussein, the son of Ali. We pray to Almighty God to continue to inspire us, for us to be able to stand our ground against racism of whatever form, against antagonism of whatever form, against discrimination of whatever form. We pray to God Almighty to inspire us to be part and parcel of champions of social justice wherever we may find ourselves. Thank you so much. I wish you all the best of luck. May God bless you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much. We're now going to move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Dr. Craig Considine. Dr. Craig Considine holds a PhD from Trinity College based out of University of Dublin. He has an MSc from Royal Holloway based out of University of London and a BA from the American University in Washington, D.C. Dr. Considine is a scholar, he's a professor, global speaker, media contributor, and public intellectual based at the Department of Sociology at Rice University. He's the author of many books and articles. Dr. Considine's opinions have been featured in the New York Times and the Washington Post, CNN, BBC, CBS News, Fox News, MSNBC, Newsweek, and also Al Jazeera. He has been invited to speak at some of the leading international organizations and universities in the world, and we are honored that he has joined us today for the 41st Annual Imam Husain Day, joining us all the way from Texas. Please give a very, very warm welcome to Dr. Craig Considine.
Greetings of peace to each and every single one of you. Thank you so much for this invitation to engage with you on the life and legacy of Imam Husain. For those who do not know me, my name is Craig Considine, and I am an Irish and Italian Catholic and an American citizen who was born in Boston, Massachusetts. And over the years, really since I was a young man, even before that, when I was about 19, I have dedicated a large portion of my energy and my time to building bridges of understanding to the various communities that we all call communities, whether it's across the religious divide, whether it's across the racial divide or the ethnic or cultural or even national divide. I've been interested in and inspired by moments in history and also people in history who provide us today with an ethical and moral template to navigate the difficulties and the challenges and the curveballs that life actually throws at us. And even more than kind of just building bridges of mere understanding, I think there is a higher calling that I strive to follow, to live up to, and that is bridges of genuine appreciation for others and love for others. And the topic of Imam Husain actually symbolizes in many ways this bridge that I'm referring to. Now, obviously, he is not a physical bridge. He would be a mighty and strong man if he could actually be the bridge, but symbolically, his moral compass is something that I think can foster our common ground and can help us transcend our differences. So his life and legacy as well is rooted in some key themes that I'm going to explore today. And some of these key themes are ethics, being ethical, the concept of honor and being honorable, the notion of justice and how we can distinguish justice and injustice, the principle of righteousness. What does it mean to be righteous? And finally, of truthfulness. These were the main themes that came to me when I was engaging in my own reading on Imam Husain. And let me say here, before we dive deep into the subject, this invitation provided me with the opportunity, really the first opportunity in my life, to really dedicate a couple days of research to Imam Husain. So historically, when I come across his life and legacy, it's in reading Islamic history. But over the last couple days, I've been reading biographies of his life and really getting a sense for what was inside his heart, what was inside his soul, and what was inside his mind. And I must say, it's inspiring. It's the type of moral and ethical conduct that I try to live my own life by. And I'll share some views about the personal connection that I've made with Imam Husain later in the talk. But let me bring you through my talk. And I'm going to actually focus on some of these ethical principles and less giving you a biographical backdrop of who Imam Husain was, because I'm guessing most of our viewers will understand the various stages of his life. But for me, I learned about the key terms, the key places, key events. So I learned about Yazid. I learned about the Battle of Karbala. I learned about Imam Husain's parents, Ali and Fatima. I learned about his brother Hassan. I learned about Imam Husain's son, Ali Akbar, who tragically died. I learned about the Umayyads, the Umayyad dynasty. I learned about Ibn Uqba. I learned about Ibn Ziyad, Ibn Aqil. I learned about the city of Kufa. And I learned about the history of Iraq. And I suppose a true historian would be quite pleased that I've done my homework on the nitty-gritty details of Imam Husain's life, but there is so much to cover in terms of principles. So I'm going to operate at a pretty abstract level, and I'm going to do my best to make this inspiring and also straightforward. Let me also add that in learning more about Imam Husain's life, I also feel like I have a better understanding of the life and legacy of Prophet Muhammad. Muhammad is someone who I've spent a good deal of time with in my research and my lived experiences. And I have a deeper appreciation for his moral conviction, knowing who Imam Husain was. Imam Husain was really following in a same kind of ethical and moral and righteous and truthful framework that his grandfather, Imam Husain's grandfather, Prophet Muhammad, had given to the world. So for me, I'm doubly lucky. I get to learn about Imam Husain, and I get to have a deeper appreciation for the Prophet. Of course, Imam Husain was close to Prophet Muhammad in the sense that he was his second grandson. But again, the deeper point here, and this is the one I would like to stress home today, is that Imam Husain was not merely close to Muhammad in terms of bloodline, but he was close to his grandfather's character and conduct, to his grandfather's moral core, and to his spirit. I think it is safe to say that both Muhammad and his grandson Hussein lived a righteous life, And being righteous at its core, I think, begins with this principle that a righteous person should never submit to an injustice, that they should never roll over and witness injustice without getting active to combat that injustice. We know that Imam Husain refused to surrender to injustice, as his grandfather had done also. When we think of injustice, I think racism is an injustice. Fundamentally, racism is one of the blatant manifestations of what God is not. God is all just, and he created us as a human race to be equal to one another. He is not making distinctions and hierarchies with his creation. His creation is just that. Just as Muhammad freed Bilal ibn Rabah, we see Imam Husain freeing his people in a different way, and I'll get to that as we move forward. And I think it's important to stress as well that the injustices that Imam Husain faced in his day, and indeed what Muhammad faced decades earlier, is really not too dissimilar. It's not too different from the type of injustices that we see in the world today. and to be more specific, not only in our world, but in our countries, in our communities, and unfortunately, even in our homes. We have misguided leaders. We have misguided rulers. And we have what feels like is increasingly obvious corruption in the world. And it was Imam Husain who refused to accept this injustice, this status quo of things just being unfair and all of us having to roll over and take it. And Imam Husain, with this moral guiding conviction and set of principles, really stepped up not only for his family, but for his people. Not just for his family and his lineage, but for what he considered his people, the Ummah. And in viewing the Ummah, we also can open this even further to the world. He was setting an example for really all of humanity, not just for the identity categories that he claimed to belong to. And in reading about Imam Husain and the political happenings of the time, I started to think more critically about what happens in transitions of power. You know, what happens when, in the context of American society, you know, Barack Obama was president for 2 terms, 2016, he leaves and President Trump comes in. And I think most of us would agree that these 2 men in a lot of ways feel fundamentally different. And, you know, what happens in this transition of power? It's not simply the moving or the replacing of a individual in an office. In the case of the United States, it's the Oval Office. But there's bigger, deeper issues going on here when we have this transition of power. And these transitions of power oftentimes teach us or show us the worst of humanity and the best of humanity. In the worst kinds of transitions of power, we witness morally bankrupt leaders. We can witness these leaders come to life. And these type of morally bankrupt leaders abuse their privilege to fulfill their own egos and to fulfill their own self-serving prophecies. These people are completely self-absorbed. And we witness morally bankrupt leaders, and they tend to never be content with their power, with their riches, with their status. They are obsessed with their own greed, and greed has many forms. These kind of morally bankrupt leaders who are really so self-absorbed, they always need to be the center of attention. They always need to win. These type of leaders are also prone to oppressing people and other communities because they don't care about serving. They care about retaining their own influence and their own social status. And furthermore, these morally bankrupt leaders are even willing to stab their allies and their friends in the back because they're willing to do anything for themselves. How selfish is that? What could be more dishonorable than the things that I just mentioned? These traits were the exact opposite kind of traits that Imam Husain stood for on the day that he passed in 680. Now, on the other hand, we have good transitions to power. When we have the darkness going into light, we have the morally bankrupt leader leaving, and we have the entrance of someone who is upright, someone who instills confidence in the people, all the people, regardless of class, race, ethnicity. These are the type of people who you have a deep trust in. You can share some very personal internal developments with these people. You can depend on them to be there in good times and in bad times. So we also see true heroes rise, true leaders rise in transitions of power. And I think what sticks out to me more than anything is the term honor. What has happened to honor in our world? You know, I was really lucky to be taught by Professor Akbar Ahmed of American University. And he taught me the beauty of Pakistani culture. And he spoke often about the emphasis that Pakistanis place on this concept of honor. And as an Irish American man, honor was always really important to who we were in terms of my ancestors and who we are. And I'll share more about that in a little bit. So it's honor. I feel like we are missing honor today, especially in this country. In these type of good transitions of power, it's, you know, to unpack honor a little bit, we have other key features of this, which I put down as bravery, courage, and sacrifice. Bravery, courage, and sacrifice. So in terms of bravery, we must have bravery to face the most insurmountable odds, while knowing very well that the outcome may not benefit us. And if I can break this down even further, having bravery to stand for what is right, even if you do not personally benefit from it. And this can be smaller things in life. Imam Husain faced insurmountable odds on the battlefield. Insurmountable. But we can also apply bravery to our everyday lives. And I think we could reflect on that a bit more. The second principle, as we unpack honor, is courage. Courage to give one's life, to be an example in one's life to a higher calling. And indeed, the highest calling, at least for me as a believer, is to live according to God's vision for his creation. And God's vision for his creation and humanity at large is naturally one of justice, naturally one of compassion as well. And the third element, as we've unpacked honor here, is sacrifice. Sacrificing our own comforts in order to teach the next generation about what is right, what is wrong, what is just, and what is unjust. And I think with Imam Husain's sacrifice in 680, you know, I don't want to speak for him, but I think he knew exactly why he needed to do what he did. Because if he didn't stand, this moral righteousness of standing for what is good, what is just, what is right for his community, it may have disappeared in history. So he was setting an example for the next generation, for his children. As all of us, as human beings, we should always be thinking about setting good examples for the next generation. So while Imam Husain may have never served as the ruler in this as this official transfer of power actually unfolded between some of his rivals, regardless of that fact, that's not what's important here. What we need to remind ourselves of is the inspiring nature of his character and conduct, his totally selfless commitment to the beliefs and the values that were handed down to him, his family, his parents, and his community through the Prophet Muhammad. And when we think about what these values and these principles are, as we kind of compare Imam Husain and Prophet Muhammad, two stories kind of stick out to me. And in preparing for this talk, I came across a quote that initiated and ignited my love of knowledge, regardless of where knowledge comes from. And the quote from Imam Husain reads, "Among the signs of a learned man is criticizing his own words and being informed of various viewpoints." I'm going to read that again. "Among the signs of a learned man is criticizing his own words and being informed of various viewpoints." To me, that is carrying oneself with honor. To carry oneself with honor, you also must be humble. You cannot kind of boast around and think that you have all the answers to everything in the world. We would call these type of people know-it-alls. Imam Husain understood that, in many ways, his character and conduct was actually uplifted and enriched in engaging in the exchange of knowledge, listening to people, having dialogue with people, being able to admit when one may not be right. These are all, I think, if I put myself in Imam Husain's position, he would look at these things as things that can enrich him. And we know that the pursuit of knowledge, the pursuit of that truthfulness that God has created, that it is linked to this idea of knowledge. And for me, in engaging in the life of Muhammad, one of the first things I learned about his life was the ink. It was a hadith, "The ink of the scholar is more sacred than the blood of the martyr." And that quote changed my life because it really forced me to grapple with some of the ideas I had in my head post 9/11. And I could see Imam Husain having a similar kind of appreciation for this type of knowledge, knowing full well that knowledge can create honor. So honor, if you haven't picked up on it yet, is one of the most obvious virtues for me in talking and thinking about Imam Husain. And he was true to Muhammad's character, true to his conduct. And I think this will be the last thing I say about comparing Imam Husain and Muhammad, but talking about having honor. And I've tried to conceptualize this here. It's doing the right thing, treating people just, being truthful, being upright and stern, being the type of person that other people have faith in, that they trust what you say. They trust that you will be there when you say you're going to be there. That's what honor means to me. And one example from Muhammad's life that I truly love, and I think this exemplifies his idea of honor, is when he stood for a Jewish person as this funeral procession was going by him and the believers. So this Jewish person had passed away, and the procession was passing in front of them, and Muhammad stood up in a sign of respect and honor for the Jewish person. And one of the believers actually said to Muhammad, "Well, what are you doing? This person is Jewish. This person's not even Muslim." And Muhammad said back, "Is it not a human life?" So Muhammad had a deep love for life itself and like the preciousness of life. Every life is precious. And to live with this kind of fundamental understanding, I think, is to honor yourself, but to also honor your fellow human beings, which is God's creation. Okay. Another thing that struck me is that Muhammad actually referred, and we get this through the historical sources, he refers to Imam Husain as a beacon of guidance, which I think really captures the essence of my recent research into his life, and I hope it kind of captures the essence of what I'm providing you with today. Honor, righteousness, to be truly righteous. This is one of the hardest things that any human being can achieve or do. And of course, we know that only God knows what it means to be truly righteous and to be honorable. But it's our duty as human beings to live up to this lofty standard of what it means to live a righteous existence here on earth. And to kind of make a link to broader Islamic theology or philosophy, if I could call it that, and this is one of the principles of the Islamic tradition that I like as a Christian and I can identify with, to be honorable, to be righteous, to be truthful and just is to have tawheed, God consciousness. God is obviously honorable. He's righteous. He's just. He is truth. He is truthful. I think to have these qualities in one's life is to be a reflection of God, to mirror God. So there's an interesting link there with tawheed. Okay, now I want to say a few words about how this affects me personally, to kind of bring us full circle here. And some of you may be wondering, okay, here's an Irish, Italian, Catholic, American. How might a person with these identity categories use these identity categories to connect with someone like Imam Husain? So my father, who is currently in Boston with my mom, he always taught me about the importance of honor and loyalty to one's family, loyalty to our roots, to where we came from, loyalty to stand up with family members and to be there when things are difficult. And if you're familiar with Irish history, I don't have enough time to get into 800 years of colonial rule. Unfortunately, the Irish had been colonized for a very long time, arguably more than any other modern day country in the world. But they had their ups and downs. Actually, over this summer, I learned about one of my great uncles who fought for the Irish Republican Army, the IRA, which has a pretty bad reputation now, but they fought an independence war against the British. And immediately after this war of independence, an Irish civil war broke out. And my uncle Michael went from fighting for the IRA to fighting against the IRA, because members of the IRA had split up and formed their new army, which is where the Civil War actually kind of ignited. It was the separation of the army. And Michael actually switched sides. He didn't switch sides because he was a traitor to the IRA. He switched sides because he had that deep moral conviction of what was right, what was honorable. And he was willing to risk his life for it. And in fact, what ended up happening was the IRA actually killed him in battle. In terms of my Italian side, if we have any Italians here watching tonight in the audience, I think you'll know how enthusiastic the Italians can be about the importance of family ties, of loyalty, of being truthful to family members, being the type of parents to instill righteousness into your children so your children can be good members of society. And then finally, as a Christian, and I'll wrap up here, I see Imam Husain as a person that had a similar kind of moral compass to that of Jesus. Jesus always, as we're told, did the right thing. He took unpopular positions and he put himself in danger to free society from its oppressions. He also faced insurmountable odds in his struggle, as Imam Husain did. But as a Christian, I can say that I actually think Jesus triumphed. And I think Imam Husain also triumphed, even though he passed on that day. Here we are, how many years later, having an entire conference, online conference in his memory. And if you will let me really quick, I'd like to end with a verse actually from the New Testament. And I found this verse in my research, and for some reason it got me thinking about a spirit of brotherhood, of sisterhood, of knowledge, of honor, of righteousness, and of understanding. Some of the big things that I focused on here today. So this verse is from Romans chapter 12, verse 9 through 13. And if you're not aware, Romans is the 6th book of the New Testament, and it was believed to be written by Paul the Apostle, who was an honorable man in his own right. So the verse reads as follows. Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality and bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. I think that really does capture this talk, and I think it captures Imam Husain's life and legacy. That is the end. I'm a little over 30 minutes, but I hope you found value in this talk. Thank you all so much for your time, and God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are going to move this program right along. Our next speaker is Mawlana Sayyid Assad Jafari. Sayyid Assad Jafari was born and raised in Toronto, Canada. He grew up in a very active Islamic community and family background. Sayyid Assad holds a Bachelor's of Computer Science degree from the United States. He worked for IBM, and thereafter he moved to Iran to enter Hausa to pursue Islamic studies, and completed his degree in Ulumul Quran from Qom. He began his Tabligh missions in 2006 with stops across different cities in the United States and also in Canada. Sayyid Assad is known as a dynamic speaker, and apart from his English lectures, he makes regular appearances at various events such as Islamic camps, fundraisers, and also seminars as well. He addresses mainly contemporary issues such as global developments and challenges facing the youth in the West. He is joining us today from Toronto, Canada. So please give a very warm welcome to Sayyid Assad Jafari.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين وهو خير الناصر ومعين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are grateful to Him. All praise is always due to Him. I am humbled and honored to be with all of you here today on Hussain Day. And I'm thankful to the organizers to include me on such a beautiful program. May Allah accept all of your efforts, inshallah, in propagating and promoting the message of Imam Husain. I won't take too much of your time. I wanted to speak a little bit about the impact of the day of Ashura and the lessons really of Karbala in this day and age, those things that are immediate right away. Sometimes, we exit the first 10 days of Muharram, that first Ashura, on a high, on a spiritual upliftment. And then it subsides and it goes down. And we sometimes don't know exactly how to maintain that level that I had during the first Ashura. And while it's impossible to recreate that energy and that gham and that grief and those feelings and those emotions during the first 10 days, it is important that we have some sort of game plan after the first 10 days, after the day of Ashura. It would be a shame that we just spend those days grieving and then moving on and not actually igniting and beginning the process of change. So one point that I want to mention of several about the immediate effect of the day of Ashura is that it should create inside of us a sense of resistance. Resistance. If we can sum up and summarize the victory of Imam Husain, and why is it that so many historians, so many great ulama have said this idea that the blood on the day of Ashura defeated the sword. The thirsty, dying ones defeated the ones that had enough water for everybody. The ones that were hungry and the ones that were alone are the ones that were the ones that defeated the ones that were surrounded by thousands. Less than 100 people defeated thousands in an army. Why do we say that? Because in Islam, it's a very simple slogan: resistance is victory. And what Imam Husain did as well, he sacrificed everything and gave everything on the day of Ashura. He gave his own Ali Asghar, he gave his own Abbas, he gave his own life. He did not give a bay'at, an allegiance, to Yazid. In the process, he resisted that notion, knowing full well of its consequences, knowing full well that there'll be repercussions. Of course, with a man that, cannot be trusted, doesn't seem to have a sense of reason or logic inside of him. And yet still, the concept and the idea of him giving allegiance to Yazid simply wasn't on the table. Someone like me, he says, can never give allegiance to someone like you. So what I want to speak to today about, briefly of course, within my 20 minutes I promise you, and that is the idea of resistance. Now what are we resisting? There are elements inside of us to resist, there are elements outside of us to resist, and especially those of my youth out there who are right now listening online, we don't need to give in to every social norm out there that everyone is doing today. And there has to come a fine time, maybe now, where we have to train ourselves to be the people of distinction. Not in an egotistical way, that I'm better than you, but in a different way, that I am on a different path than you. And your path is not one that I agree with, just like my path may not be one that you agree with. In Surah Fussilat in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this amazing group of people. He says the ones that إِنَّ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا رَبُّنَا اللَّهُ ثُمَّ اسْتَقَامُوا. It's a very beautiful verse, a very famous one, mind you, but one that I think fits in every dawr, every era, and every age, and this is no different. Look at what Allah is saying. He says, for the ones who say that our Lord is Allah, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا رَبُّنَا اللَّهُ, our Lord is Allah. Right? We all say that, right? We all say La ilaha illallah, of course. ثُمَّ اسْتَقَامُوا, and they do maqabimat, as they say in Farsi. Okay? Istiqamat. They don't bend, they don't apologize, they don't break, they don't run from the path. They stay firm, they stay upright, right? They're strong, they're confident in their belief. What can they expect that they do that? Meaning they pair the verbal expression of La ilaha illallah with the firmness on the path. They can expect تَتَنَزَّلُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْمَلَائِكَةِ. Angels will now descend onto them with 3 pieces of news. أَلَّا تَخَافُوا وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا وَأَبْشِرُوا بِالْجَنَّةِ الَّتِي كُنْتُمْ تُوعَدُونَ. These are people, the angels will come and say, you are not to grieve. وَلَا تَخَافُوا. Don't be afraid. وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا. Don't grieve. And accept the basharat, accept the good news of Jannah that Allah has promised unto you. In this world that right now that we live in, there's a lot of fear, a lot of grieving. People are very scared what's going to happen, what's going to happen, what's going to happen. The individual now that stays on the path, saying La ilaha illallah at the same time, does istiqamat, does not apologize, doesn't bend, is a mountain now. The mountain stays while the wind howls, while the trees shake. Even sometimes the ground can shake, but the mountain won't move from where it is. And Hadith says that a mu'min kal-jabal is just like a mountain. It's just like a mountain. They will not go anywhere. Okay. One of the things that Imam Husain refused now adamantly to move from was this path, that I will never accept this man to be the Khalifa of Islam. He resisted and paid a heavy price for it. Sacrifice is azim. But the other notion just wasn't an option. It wasn't an option. So one of the absolute quickest ways and the immediate results of the day of Ashura is for us now to invoke this sense of resistance inside of us. If we have a desire inside of us towards something that's haram and satanic and destructive, we have to build that willpower, that resolve to walk away from it. If there are social norms right now, whether it be, fashion, or whether it be social media, whether it be music, or whatever the case may be, that everyone is doing that, it doesn't mean that me, as a mu'min of Amir al-Mu'mineen, as a believer in the walayat of the Ahlul Bayt, I have to accept that path. That's my resistance. And resistance is victory. Resistance is victory. Every moment that you resist a satanic temptation, that's your victory. Every moment that you walk away from a destructive environment, that's your victory. Every moment that you give up and sacrifice now the norms, be it followers and subscribers and God knows what else, then you have entered the realm of victory. Okay? I ask myself first and foremost. We all agree that Imam Husain's sacrifice, it's a grand sacrifice. It's an azim sacrifice. For what? For Islam, for humanity, for light, for nur, for piety, for a life that's not based on chaos, for a life that's not built on desire, for a life that's not animalistic in nature. All these things he went out, he told the Holy Prophet, I'm leaving Nana for what? For the Islah of your Ummah, for the Islah of your Ummah, for the Islah of your, to reform and change and what? And purify and better your Ummah. I say all that because I will ask you a very important question. I'll ask myself first, if Imam Hussain sacrificed that much for the deen, what am I sacrificing today? What am I resisting against today? If I know that music is a huge part of my life, I can't study without it, I can't drive without it, I can't cook without it, I can't clean with it's always, I have one, those guys that I find to be irritating. You're talking to them and one earpod is AirPods inside of their ear. Just one. The other one, of course, I'm like, dude, just take it out, man. Like, what? Like, am I not worthy of both your ears? What I'm saying is not worthy of both. You have to give. I'll give you my left ear, but my right ear, I got my jabs going on. I got my tunes on right now. If we know that is a problem, because really part of the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that He helps us to identify what our deficiency is. Imam Jafar as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wa salam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, he says that one of the immediate results of Allah befriending somebody, listen to the words very carefully, one of the immediate results of Allah befriending somebody is that He makes them aware of their own deficiencies. Allah. What a beautiful deen this is. What a beautiful God He is. You'll think, oh my God, that's so mean. Why would He do that? Because He knows it's for your betterment. If you have a friend, a spouse, anyone who's close to you that comes and says, you know what, you really should be working on this, and their need, this comes from a good place. They're not, they're not shaming you. They're not, they're not gaslighting you. They're not doing all these things out there. What they're doing actually is they're helping you grow. They're helping you grow. And sometimes we need external help to help us grow. Okay? Now, when Allah allows us to understand my own deficiencies, that's a huge blessing. Once I know that, I know what to work on. So if all of you, for example, if me, for example, I have an addiction to music, for example, and don't tell me about Beethoven and classical music and Mawlana Rizvi, can I listen to this? Is all music haram? Dude, the music you want to listen to is haram. Let's put it that way. Okay? Let's put it that way. And by the way, since I'm here, how anybody ever wants to make today's hip-hop R&B music scene halal is an insult to the deen. It really is an insult to the deen. The disgusting, destructive nature of the music industry today, okay? What they do for hits, what they do for likes, what they do for downloads, what they do, let's say, for subscribers, all of that, right? To simply strip yourself of any sort of dignity and shame, all of that in a public forum. And then for us now, as dignified Muslims, to take this disgusting industry and somehow now make it fit inside of a purified deen is an insult to that religion that Imam Husain had his head cut for. The same deen Imam Husain trampled his body for is the same deen that's muqaddas and pure, that has no room for this behudigi and this disgusting nature of this music industry. Okay, it's not my topic. I wish it was, but it's not. But if we've identified, for example, one example, that music is my problem. My problem is music. My sacrifice is that I'm going to work towards removing music from my life. Removing music from my system. That's my sacrifice. That's my resistance, because resistance is victory. I'll say it 1,000 times. Resistance is victory. You may not get the desired results, but in that resistance is your ultimate success. Sorry, I don't want to go over my 20 minutes. That's why I looked at my clock. I have 8 minutes left. Because the reality is that, a lot of us believe that, look, I resist this, I don't do that, but I don't see any results. What's the point, right? Because we live in a result-driven society. I've been saying up and down Maharm, wherever I speak, we are looking for results right away, impactful, overnight results, right? I want to pop the Advil in the morning, my headache is gone. That's the life that we live, right? I want instant gratification. I want to know that the moment that I stop eating carbs for a week, the scale drops down and those pants actually now fit me. That's the instant I want in my deep, and that's not what we're ever going to get. Yeah, there are moments where I can see the results of my actions right away, fine. But overall, the deen is an investment, a result, a process-driven investment. And Allah is obsessed with the process, and He rewards you on that process. So while resistance doesn't always equal results, resistance itself is a process that's successful. Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam gave his life, sacrificed every ounce of his being, his loved ones, his children, his ashab, everybody. Right? That was his resistance. Trample my body, but you'll never get my bay'at. Kill my Ali Asghar, you'll never get my bay'at. Take my women captives, you'll never get my bay'at. That's my resistance. And that was his victory. But the results didn't happen right away, guys. Yazid ruled for 2 more years afterwards. If we want to believe in a result-driven process, I'm sorry. Then we are forced to say, God forbid, that Imam Husain's entire mission was a waste of time because it didn't result in Yazid on the spot within a few months now, losing his kingdom. He didn't. 2 years this man ruled after the day of Ashura. But yes, Imam Husain planted that seed. He was the jud and the root of the dismantling of Yazid's government, no doubt. But it took some time. My point is that a lot of you might think, why should I invest in a system that I won't see the results in right away? And yet in every other system in this world, we invest. Our ROI won't come till 10, 15 years down the road, right? I might invest in a home, hoping to flip that house and make a profit. The equity has to grow. Look, they'll say, look, this is a 5-year project, Mr. Jafari. You're giving the down payment of the house, and I will build the house, I'll rent it out, the equity will grow, and then inshallah in 5-6 years, when the market is high, we'll sell it, and we will be able to cash in on the equity. That's 5 years from now. Meanwhile, you're giving it, $20,000-$25,000. Right? We invest in our children. What you do at the age of 5 with a child, you're hoping to see at the age of 25. We invest in our marriage. We are in this for the long haul. Let's make sure that we're not just those 6-month couples where now, in one side we do qabiltu, let's say in 6 months later we do talaq, God forbid. All of that goes back to resistance. Maqabimat. Allah says the one who does that, they won't have fear, they won't grieve, and Jannah is waiting for them. We have to learn to resist inside of us. Resist the urge. You don't always need to say yes to everything that your urges and desires tells you to. And that's the problem. We live in a very, very me-centric society. It's you. You do you, bro. Look, if you want to do that, man, stay true to yourself. Like one of the... Sometimes we see these statements on social media, okay? And or these hashtags, and we think, oh man, that's very profound. I'm going to use that hashtag, right? True to myself. Just be you. You be you, bro. You do you, man. Just be true to you. Keep it real, homie. Keep it real, homie. Right? Sounds great, right? Sounds very, revolutionary. It's a horrible statement. Because no matter how you are to accept who you are. So if I come to you and I say, for example, look, man, when you get angry, you're pretty vicious, man. Your mouth is gone, right? Your language is corrupt. You even, God forbid, start to wail your arms, you become violent. If I were you, I would, do your best to control your anger. Yeah, man, I'm keeping it real. This is who I am. This is who I am. I'm not going to fake myself, right? When I get angry, I scream, but that's who I am, and I got to do me. It's like, wait a second, what about reform? What about elevation? What about progress? What about becoming better? None of that. So there's no resistance. Anything that comes from inside of us, it's accepted. Why? Because we have to be true to ourselves, right? Please, I ask my youth out there, my young guys, don't fall for these absurd statements, no matter how good it looks on a hashtag or a meme. Please. These are destructive pieces of advice. Resistance is victory. Resist on the inside, the shaitan inside of us. Only then can we understand the Adim sacrifice of Imam Husain. And then Ashura becomes an immediate impact in our life. Otherwise, like I said, it becomes ritualistic, annual tradition. Day of Ashura comes, Sham al-Ghiba comes, it comes, goes, we go back to our normal life. That's not. Imam Husain deserves better. The deen deserves better. So I ask you humbly as your brother, and I'll also work with you as well inside of me. I also need to resist inside of me. In this society that's telling our youth that, look, your nafs is your God, your desire is your God, whatever you want, you should go out and get it. Islam says, no, fight that urge. There are destructive elements inside of you. Resist against those elements. Stand up against those elements. The moment that we crush the Yazid inside of us, we become the Hussaini outside of us. The moment that we drown the Fir'aun inside of us, we become Musavi outside of us. The moment that we extinguish the fire of desire inside of us, we become the Ibrahim outside of us. Then we've done something post Ashura. Otherwise, like I said, it's only rusumat. We have to convert that into ibadat, inshallah. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to accept our qaleel efforts. We ask you, Allah, to please, inshallah, propagate this message of Islam. Help us now to spread the message of Imam Husain wherever we can. Inshallah, we ask you to please pray for the ummah, pray for all those who are sick from the coronavirus, be it our equals in humanity or our brothers and sisters in faith. And finally, Allah, one dua that we have is to allow us to be worthy of the Imam's arrival. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much for those words. And now we come to the closing of this program. Before we close, I would like to introduce our last speaker of the afternoon, the current president of Imam Husain Day, Dr. Assad Sadiq, to deliver the closing remarks. Dr. Assad Sadiq is a prominent and notable personality in the community. He has served as president of the Universal Muslims Association of America and has served as chairman for Muslim Foundation. Currently, he is the senior vice president of the Universal Muslims Association of America and also serves as the vice chairman of Muslim Foundation as well. He's also the president of the Shia Association of North America and is the North American representative of Tanzim al-Muqaddam. And despite his many titles, accomplishments, and blessings, he is known in the community to be a humble and very giving individual. For the closing remarks, it is my pleasure to introduce, please welcome Dr. Assad Sadiq.
Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters, and my esteemed speakers and ulama. My name is Dr. Assad Sadiq, and I am the president of the Imam Husain Day Celebrating Committee. I am here today to thank you all for your selfless efforts in helping us deliver the message of Imam Husain to the entire world, to the entire community, and to the entire nation. Pandemic or no pandemic, The word of Imam Husain will not stop. The message of Imam Husain will not cease. For over past 4 decades, this event of Imam Husain Day celebration has been going on non-stop. I thank all the volunteers who have strived selflessly for the past 3-4 weeks to make this event a success. My special thanks are due for Mawlana Sayyid Rizvi, Mawlana Assad Jafari, Mawlana Sheikh Nuru Muhammad, Dr. Considine, and Father Clohisi. These were the speakers of the event for this year, and they have done a wonderful job in delivering their topics in a very concise and effective way, in their eloquent manner. The message of Imam Husain is very relevant and extremely important in today's environment when the "I cannot breathe" slogan is reverberating throughout the world. Black Lives Matter can be seen all over, whether it is in front of the White House, or whether in front of the Buckingham Palace, or whether it is in front of the power sharing or decision-making lobbies and alleys. It is extremely important to value the human life. It's extremely important to value the freedom bestowed upon us by the Almighty Allah. It is extremely important to value it's extremely important for us to value the benefits that Allah has given us, so that we can function in a harmonious fashion, and we can function in a justifiable fashion throughout. Justice, as you all very well know, is the pillar of Islam, and that's exactly what Imam Husain was striving for. And that's exactly what we have been trying to relay to the community through events like what you see today. My sincere thanks are to those volunteers who have struggled so hard to make this event a success. I do not want to lessen the efforts and the work of Dr. Mawlana Rizvi, who was the initiator of this event in the late 70s. Because of him, the community in New Jersey has been able to benefit his talent and his presence, and also his hard work to continue the message of Imam Husain. With that, I thank you all once again, and please help us continue this work, inshallah, in future. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much, sir. We now come to the end of the program. To all the viewers, thank you for joining us this afternoon and taking the time out to join us for the 41st Annual Imam Husain Day. On behalf of the Imam Husain Day Committee, we hope and pray that during these times you are all safe, happy, and healthy, and pray that next year we can all come together to honor the memory of Imam Husain like we're normally used to. We hope you took something of value today from this program in understanding the inspiration of Imam Husain. And in these turbulent times, I leave you with this quote from Imam Husain: "Be steadfast and firm in the way towards what is right, even if your journey is full of pain and challenges." Thank you so much again for all those that tuned in. Peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.